Welcome to the podcast, Raw Lessons Revealed. I'm your host, Craig T. Ingram, coming to you live from Austin, Texas. On this podcast episode, you're about to listen to raw, real, no-nonsense lessons from a gentleman who really needs no introduction. But for those of you who might be pretty new to our industry of MedTech, HealthTech, and life sciences, Joe Mullings is a trailblazer in the world of executive search, bringing over 3 decades of experience to the table. As the founder, chairman, and CEO of the Mullings Group, he has orchestrated more than 9,000 successful searches. His client portfolio spans from established multi-billion-dollar corporations to venture capital-supported startups worldwide. He introduced a groundbreaking concept by integrating media and talent access called Dragonfly. It is a media production arm of the Mullings Group. With a state-of-the-art studio, Dragonfly produces captivating content that amplifies brand visibility and attracts top-tier talent. Joe himself hosts the award-winning video docuseries True Future, which delves into the future of healthcare and technology. So with all that said, let's dive in and talk to another ultra-successful business professional who we can learn from and help transform our businesses in learning what it takes to find talented people and build real, genuine, successful businesses. Well, Joe, it's a pleasure having you on the podcast, Raw Lessons Revealed. And we have been in this industry for nearly 30 years. And you've specifically have been in this industry since what, 1990? Is that right?
89, December 4th, 1989. I'm not
Yep,
keeping
there
track.
you go. And, being in the recruiting space for MedTech, HealthTech, even before really digital healthcare was its own sector within our industry, you've probably seen an immense amount of drastic change, not just change. I'm going to go right into it. What would you like to bring back from the 90s to now that you
Platform
think is maybe
shoes?
more effective than what's happening now when it comes to the recruiter world?
Yeah, what would I like to bring back from the 90s in the recruiter world?
Yeah.
It's funny. I just had a gentleman over here. We're looking to expand out into China, and we were chatting about it yesterday. And he is built his business in China as a headhunter, and they don't have LinkedIn over there. And I said, God, I long for the days that LinkedIn didn't exist, because if you're old enough to know this, that when we started headhunting, you started with a SIC book, SIC book. That was a code. Right? You'd open up the book, you'd open it up and say Valcor Engineering, Springfield, New Jersey, SIC code 3498, which made valves for the health tech, or it didn't even have the word health tech, sort of medical device industry back then. You picked it up and then you rused the switchboard. And then after you rused the switchboard, you got through to engineering. And after you got through to engineering, then you found out the engineer. And then you called at lunchtime because switchboard operator wasn't there. They'd give you the names. I long for that as a headhunter, because that's where all the skills were learned on how to work the phone, how to interact with people, how to use silence as a tool, and really grind it out. And now it's like I sort of analogous to, you really are a better driver if you could drive a 5-speed instead of an automatic car. And the same thing with recruiters today. Most recruiters are not nearly as good as the ones who grew up before the internet, before LinkedIn for sure.
Yep.
And understood how to problem solve and unwind the switchboard. So that's what I long for as a recruiter. But hey, running water and flushing toilets are a better thing than not.
That's interesting. I remember the big, thick red book. It was the directory of recruiters or something. It was literally like 1,200 pages. Were you ever in that book?
I tried to stay off the radar screen, but you'd never guess that today with all the media we have. But you used to be able to buy, there used to be an underground business in headhunting where the cleaning crews would lift the phone books out of the companies and sell them in the black market. So then you got everybody's name and their department and their extension number. And there was a broker out of New York who used to sell these to headhunting firms. So
Yeah.
that's how we used to unpack back in the day. So
That
we
is
used
funny.
underground recruiting, man, for sure. And it was a big business. You were paying like a couple thou for those phone books.
Wow, that's funny. I did not know that. That's a
Yeah.
hoot. Um, wow. It's interesting because trying to place the right person at the right company, I get calls from recruiters on a regular basis and everything, and they talk about culture. And do you find that it's gotten more difficult to put the right person into a company because of culture fit? Or would you say it's actually less complicated now because everybody says they're a fast-paced company. Everybody says that they have the best culture. Everybody says, we come alongside of you when things get hard. And then in my experience, I go to some of these companies or I talk to some of these companies and I talk to some of the people in them, and it is 100% the antithesis of that.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Culture is a very broad word, and there's no way that your culture can sort of fit everybody. And culture can say, if you've worked in an organization, big organization especially, you've got cultures, you've got subcultures, you've got
Right.
your culture for your A player, you've got your culture for your B player, you've got your culture for what I call the Price is Law people. That's the person, the square root of the number of people in your company do 50% of the work.
Yep.
So the A players always seem to find themselves, and they have their own culture, right? They will rise to a point where they almost will disregard the B and C players because they've adopted this mindset: is if you're not moving my ball forward personally or my team's ball forward, I'm not going to spend a lot of time with you. And that's not right or wrong. Oftentimes, those people are viewed as elitists. But look, they're just high performers. We've all heard Kobe over the last couple of years. Well, not Kobe himself, obviously, unfortunately, but people who played close to Kobe or watched him, where they used to think he was a ball hog. There's a great clip out there, and Kobe then said, "Listen, I watched you in practice. I watched when you showed up at practice. I watched you with your phone in your hand at practice. I watched how early you left from practice. If I got 5 seconds on the clock, I'm not giving you the ball. I'm taking the shot." And so that quote unquote culture transcends and exists in every company. It just matters, is it a very small cohort or is it a larger than statistically norm cohort? So I see that occurring. And then on the other side of the extreme are the people who just show up every day. God bless them. You need them. They punch a clock. They're in 9 to 5. They do the work they're supposed to do, and they're out. And those personas exist in every single company, regardless of whether it's 5 people or 5,000 people. So I guess that would be my answer to that. You should know what you're getting into, and you should be a really good interviewer and just figure out what you're going to tolerate in the job that you're taking.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because I was fortunate last year to share a stage with Phil Jackson. I spoke at an event, and he was a couple speakers after me, and he talked about the high performing culture. He said, "You don't hire specifically." This is from the sports arena. He goes, it would be different from the corporate world, but he goes, "I'm hiring for skill set. I can manage the person. I want to make sure they're good. And I don't want them to lose who they are." And it's interesting because as I thought about that, sometimes people can lose who they are in a company, right? They become so blindly obedient. The people that are in leadership can be more authorities, right? Because they have authority over you, but they're not leaders, right? With that being said, from what Phil Jackson said, what do you think about the transition nowadays when it comes to true leadership? Do you think that is starting to become a lost art, and we're more focusing on just checking a box? Or do you think that leadership is being more dissected out in companies?
It's a really good question. Look, I think the skill of leadership is there. I also think that it's somewhat encumbered because of this drive for a quality of outcomes instead of a quality of opportunity. And so that initiative has really impacted high performers who are frustrated, and leaders are frustrated where you could no longer, and I'm not saying it was proper, but I think we lost the extreme of it is you better make your damn numbers. And your number could be a sales number. Your number could be a design number. Your number could be how many widgets you make. Like, make your numbers. This is capitalism. And I think the cancel culture has permeated part of the professional environment in a way that has affected the ability for leaders to live out loud. Now, having said that, I'm not saying that the definition of leadership in the Jack Welch rank and yank perspective and berating people was the way to go. What I am saying, though, is creating an environment where everybody gets the same opportunity, but the outcomes aren't predetermined by a by an already predetermined, we have to meet this in regards to the people that we put on the team. And so I think that's affected things. And there's a lot of bad that comes with that, from personal development, attracting really great people. But there's also some good that's come with it, that it's had us realize that equality of opportunity did not exist previously with a conscience. And now we do have that existing, but like a lot of things, it went to an extreme of outcomes versus opportunity. And I would say that has hindered certain types of leadership in the workplace in general.
You know, it's interesting you say that, because I would agree the hindering is big time, because I find that you have, I'm going to boil it down to just kind of there's two types of leaders, right? There's the ones that say, get it done, go do it. I trust you until I can't trust you, right? And then there's the other ones that are constantly over you, reminding you that you're on payroll, that you're needing to hit that number, right? And I find that there needs to be a balance, right? Obviously, we're going to fit on one side of the fence or the other, and I find that in my experience, some of the chief revenue officers, the chief commercial officers, they don't, they because they're in the forest, right? They're only seeing individual trees. They're not bringing people from outside to be able to look at the whole forest, right? And to find those gaps. You know, I've put out there that there's 10 components of effective commercialization, and it's important for the leadership to just at least have a taste of each one and to know enough about each one to have the right conversations, to direct the vision, to direct the strategy, and to even go on a tactical level and be able to ask some tough questions to make sure the ball is actually moving, you know, down the field to hit that touchdown, for lack of a better example.
Let me jump on that for a second, because leadership is determined in the hiring process. So one of the things our organization does, and the things I've been preaching now for a few years to my clients, is switching the hat of saying, not are you good enough to join our team, but what we do in our organization is we want to make sure people have the skills, and it doesn't have to be in domain skills. It has to be IQ, organizational skills, communication skills, written especially these days more than verbal.
Yeah.
And then we explain to them that we are the Super Bowl team. Everybody wants to play alongside Mahomes. Everybody does. And having said that, that's cool. But are you willing to do Super Bowl things by the hour, by the day, by the week, by the month, by the year? You romantically are sitting across the table from me right now. Mm-hmm. And you romantically want to play on that Super Bowl Sunday. Mm-hmm. But you really need to think, because these are the things that we do here without exception. And every teammate in that foxhole with you is expecting that without exception.
Yep.
And here's who we are. You have the skills that we have determined so far, the raw combined skills. Having said that, are you willing to go to this extreme level on a regular basis? And if you are, then we should continue to chat. If you're not, it's totally cool. But we want to make sure that we are good for you. And when you flip your interview process that way, then leadership becomes easier, more transparent, and you get into an environment where you say, here's what I'd like to get done. I'm not going to tell you how to do it, because we came to a partnership in the interview process and in your onboarding, and then now you see how the game is played, and you've gone through, we say jokingly, the 60-day TMG flu, because you have never had this level of performance surrounding you before in an organization, and it becomes so hard until you acclimate to it. So you get the 60-day flu and you actually get sick.
Yep.
Right. But then you break through and you become who you can become. Leadership suddenly becomes a different game.
Yep.
And you're not micromanaging. And that's why I say leadership begins in the interview process.
Yeah, man, I like that a lot. I've heard snippets of you on some of the videos where you've said that before, but in the way that you put it today, clears up, like it just makes it very clear, right? And I appreciate that. One of the things that I find as well, within the interview process is I find that talking with managers and hiring leaders, they're looking for a safe hire, and I tell them, there's no such thing as a safe hire. The longer you draw out the interview process does not reduce the risk of making you of a better hire, right? Because you only know what people can do when they're in the trenches with you. I was fortunate enough to have Fred Fishback, who's one of the 724 billionaires in the United States. He said to me, he said, Craig, I used to hire very slow, and it would be a long round of multiple interviews. And he said, as I've connected and built my business and been one of the few people in this world that has reached the B Club, he said, most of these interviews don't really need to go past 2 or 3, because you're hiring for integrity, number one. You can't find that in the interview process. You find that over time as you've watched people, right? And a lot of the people he hires, he's known for 5, 6, 8 years, maybe not intimately personally knowing them, but he knows about them and knows enough people and has had enough interactions over years to say, this person walks the talk, right? What do you say about that from a standpoint of safe hire versus long interviewing? Some of the nonsense questions a lot of hiring managers and hiring people in leadership ask, instead of really getting to the heart of the matter.
Well, the first thing is that statement only holds true if all interview processes are the same, and they are not.
Correct.
Right. So therefore, the quality of your hire also comes directly down to the quality of your interview process. And again, there's things in an interview process, and there's things that in any sort of creative job. So for now, we're not a communist state or a socialist state, at least for now.
Thank God.
But in a capitalist environment, in a creative, open architecture capitalist environment, there, as I mentioned earlier, there's a few things that are non-negotiable: is IQ, adversity quotient, the ability to handle adversity and still perform, organizational skills.
Yep.
And as you said, integrity, because there's nothing worse than a really smart person who's organized, who has no integrity. I've had them work for me before. and they are toxic and they can crush an organization.
I've seen it. I've lived it.
Yeah. So your B Club gentleman there was right. Is integrity on like non-negotiable integrity. And so once you get those things and you can get a good way to assess those, the rest of the interview process really should be a selling process to that individual that you are trying to land. And we always say, what else do you need to know to make a decision here? We'd love to have you come on board. We think that we could be a good fit for you and accommodate who you can become. What else do you need to know? And who else would you like to talk to? Because we want to move forward. So I'm okay with the interview process going longer because that individual needs more diligence to make the best decision. So when they come on board, their yes really means yes, not a yes until they find something else that they're in process on.
Yeah, there's a lot in there, what you just said. That's interesting. Do you find that these people in leadership, whether it's a startup or whether it's a mid-stage growth, because large cap, Fortune 500, Fortune 1000 companies are at a different level, but from a startup or mid-stage growth standpoint, do you find that the leadership has a difficult time finding people that are willing to do the work, especially if the leadership comes from a Fortune 500 or Fortune 1000 company like they have, and now they're the CEO or chief operating officer of this startup, and now they're like, oh my gosh, I got to find people who are not like the people that I used to work with that are willing to clock out from 8 to 5, right? I do need people to be able to take that aren't going to get upset if I send them an email on a Sunday morning, right? Or if I give them a quick call on a Saturday afternoon. I'm totally one of those people. I've never gotten upset with anybody when they've reached out to me on a Sunday night or a Saturday morning, because I tell them up front, I'm willing to do this, right? Because I know that success doesn't have a day off, right? And I know that you don't want to be a workaholic, but you have to do whatever it takes, not just what is convenient. And I find that if you're somebody that is willing to do whatever it takes, you can rub people the wrong way that think work-life balance is reality, when in my opinion, and talking to a lot of these ultra high net worth 8, 9, and 10 figure liquid net worth business owners, they're like, Craig, there's no such thing as work-life balance. You work really hard for a season, and then you take a few days or a couple weeks off at a time or whatever the case, but there's no ideal balance. You got to put in all for a season and then take off for a little season, put all in for a season. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's work-life integration. So we can take the word balance out of there, and it depends what your end goals are, professionally, personally, economically, et cetera. Right. So there's who is it? Nick, you're in the control room. Who's that guy who gave the keynote, who used to coach Jordan and Kobe and
Tim
Grover.
Tim Grover. So I got to see
right
Tim
here.
speak, and
Relentless.
And Tim talks about this. He says anybody who has experienced success at that elite level has never lived a life that's balanced. And with that comes tremendous sacrifice. And there's a lot when Grover says that, because something's got to give. And it depends. There are people who are born, from the day they're born, they know they're exceptional and they know they've got a calling to go all in on whatever it is. And they often get judged and labeled by those who are not willing or not wired to do it that way. And neither of them is right or wrong, but there's nothing that sucks than being in your last days and having regret that you didn't go all in because you were socially influenced or built into guilt by not pursuing this insane thing that was the voice inside you that you have to listen to. So organizations that are elite players at their core are all in, are quote unquote out of balance, are non-negotiable, and generally they're pulled along by a few. Generally, they're pulled along by people who absolutely view this as a sport. business as a sport. And that's the only way to sort of communicate to people who it's not viscerally embedded with them, because you can see great athletes, right? We applaud these great performances, these Olympians, these baseball players, basketball players. Very, 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 very few purely got there naturally. They had those natural skills and then had to develop them. Yet
Right.
for some reason, when it comes to business and a business person is quote unquote out of balance, they're judged. Yet a pro
100%.
athlete is never judged when he or she is at the elite level of their game. And look, a guy like Tom Brady, Brady, unfortunately, has had part of his life examined with his marriage and his kids and his competitiveness. That guy 24/7 was way out of balance, as every other elite athlete is, but he was never judged. Yet a business person is judged. And if you look at business as a sport, you might rewire that in your head on your judgment cycle.
I love that, because I will tell you from experience, it hurts to be judged harshly because you love business and you're told you need to have more work-life balance, or you need to do this. You can't be emailing somebody on a Saturday morning. And I'm like, they don't have to return the email. I'm just getting it out to them. Right. Like it does kind of hurt away, because you're like, wait a minute here. I'm trying to build something here that's dynamic. And, if some of the people don't want to do it, that's okay. That's part of leadership, right? Is being able to assess who on your team is like you, who's not like you, and how to serve them, to make them part of the team as they perform appropriately. But I love hearing that from you, because it's just a confirmation of, for me, that's a breath of fresh air.
This is a sport.
I totally agree with you. 100%.
It's a sport, man. Play it like a sport.
Yep.
Judge it like a sport. Celebrate the winners like a sport. Admire the who is it? Roosevelt? Was it Roosevelt? Admire the warrior in the arena, and just switch that over to business, baby.
Yeah. It's interesting when we talked about Kobe and Phil Jackson a few minutes ago. Kobe used to do so much conditioning and so much practice when nobody was around. He was sharpening the blade of his craft, right? And Michael Jordan the same way, right? Like I think of business as our craft. Like, what is our craft in the business, right? And we should be sharpening that sword on a regular basis. When being in the recruiting world as you are, would you say background is more important or less important? Or would you say skill set is more important, less important, when it comes to the two different dynamics of somebody being hired?
It matters on what timeline you're looking on, right? So if we go into medical device, when we hire here, ideally we have somebody who has some med tech experience. We hired guys just crushing it right now. Ryan Blasco, a couple of years ago, he was a senior director of sales, spent a number of years at Ambu, BSC, a couple other med tech companies, just crushing it right now. And that really helped him out of the gate, because learning medical device, all the functions, all the disease state, all the nuances, all the therapies, right? That takes years.
Correct.
Right? Years. So therefore you can't expect much out of somebody, but you can go out and hire somebody, again, who's got the IQ, the AQ, adversity quotient, intelligence quotient, organizational skills, and communication skills. So we really test heavy up front for that, and then what we do is manage expectations. And then our training program, and our mentoring program, make sure we can bring them up as quick as possible. But then we have to make sure in the interview process, we determine if they're a lifelong learner, because in their off hours, while they're working on their work-life integration, they've got to be coming up to speed on the MedTech HealthTech, as well as the business model within MedTech and HealthTech that's emerging today, and be able to coalesce and put all that sort of 3D chessboard together. So in headhunting, answering your question, short term, I need the AQ, IQ, integrity, organizational skills. Long term, I've got to really work on an understanding of the med tech industry at large.
Yep, makes sense. Well, that's I think that's really important. Do you think that as the med tech, as our industry progresses, do you think it's going to be more important from a commercialization standpoint? Because that's what I focus on. Everything from market research all the way to post-market analysis and post-sale customer service and everything in between, sales, marketing, production, all that PR, everything. As we progress in our industry in the med tech world and new technologies are coming out, do you see where there will be a pause in the amount of digital healthcare aspect in med tech, or do you think it's just going to progress and mesh in the next, say, 5 to 10 years? Because I'm thinking that with the digital world, it's still somewhat separate from med tech, but we're starting to see some integration. Do you think it's going to be hyper accelerated, or do you think it's going to be more of a slower acceleration because there's going to be a lot of bugs to work out?
Define digital for me, first of all. It's a very broad category.
It is. So broad digital would be software-based AI learning and AI conclusions in the
Got it.
med tech.
Okay, so in that world, the question comes down to it was a very frothy market the last couple of years, and all kinds of money went in until people couldn't define how they were going to get paid or how the technology was going to reimburse. So that's number one. I think AI, if we're really going to make it effective, right now in imaging, there's a high value there because you can see with a computer eyes better than human eyes. And it's a lot easier to train that algorithm. And it's a very finite and a very sort of straight down the middle data set. Where AI is going to really struggle longitudinally is if we continue to try and apply it in an open environment. It's just not built for that right now as it is. Where I think AI has the biggest impact on our 18% GDP of the US's GDP and the cost is going to be helping align incentives here. In the last 40 years, the administrative addition to healthcare has been 3,500% headcount. In the clinical side to doctors, it's been 150% increase in headcount. So the bloated GDP now is occurring in the paperwork that's happening in between the seams from the poor doctor who's no longer administering medicine face-to-face down to the insurances, administrators, and paperwork. AI can have the biggest impact in the cost to our GDP in that administrative side of healthcare. Yep.
That makes complete
sense. Not in the medicinal side of healthcare. That will come in time. But right now, if you want to apply AI/digital as you've defined it, it needs to be in that administrative burden released into healthcare.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
And you don't worry about reimbursement there because you're peeling out non-reimbursable services and costs anyway. And so trying to bring AI into the actual application beyond the straight up imaging diagnostic right now, which will continue to grow.
Correct.
I think your immediate impact to the tune of trillions of dollars occurs in reducing the administrative workload that has become bloated in healthcare over the last 30 years.
Man, that makes complete sense on that. Last question. I always like to leave something somewhat controversial for people to think about. What do you think the largest or biggest mistake that company leaders in the MedTech HealthTech world in our industry should be looking at to prevent from happening, right? What do they need to be looking at and saying, we can't do X, we have to change X? Yeah. What would you say that would be the biggest lesson revealed?
Closed architecture, closed API within their environment, and the rate of acceleration of technology and the cycle of change taking place in technology right now, where your top 10 companies predominantly in medtech are non-digital natives. The only leading digital native is Intuitive Surgical. Everybody else is classically an analog make a medical device. And those organizations have continued to trip over themselves as they try to enter this digital age of medtech. And you could just start pointing to surgical robotics with the Medtronics and the J&Js, and right. So they're just fumbling and getting crushed. As and that's an example, and not the only one, but having an open API and saying, if it change the mindset of it's not made here, it's crap. There are so many co-sourcing opportunities. You never want to outsource a core competency.
Agreed.
But you want to co-source a core competency that you wish to have. And as we transition these analog devices that these multi-billion-dollar a year companies have to put a digital intelligence and advisement capability on it, whether it's cloud, Bluetooth, whatever it is, you're going to have to co-source with experts who are niche players in that area and open the mindset of a JV of shared revenue, of licensing in and out as a regular basis. Yeah. And I think if we continue to have a closed architecture and really believe that you can do everything in your billion-dollar company, you're going to start to see you fall from number one to number two, as happened just last year with Medtronic.
Yep.
And you're going to continue to see those players drop down over time, and those that are co-sourcing with digital partners quickly moving up on them. So that would be my advisement that I'm watching from the sidelines for 30 years.
That's awesome. That is great. Joe, I can't thank you enough for taking the time to be on the program. It's great to connect with you on a one-on-one basis instead of necessarily just commenting back and forth on our messaging, on LinkedIn and everything. I think the listeners are going to really see some value in this and to spark some conversation. And the goal is to make somebody uncomfortable enough so that they can dive in and become obsessed with their business, whatever it is, right? And I know that the word obsessed traditionally has been negative, but I will tell you, you can't become elite without being obsessed in your business. And
that's the words of Tim Grover right there, man.
I've got the book right here. I just, I see that in your business, right? I see you guys, identifying the right candidates, or what I would consider call them contenders, right? And putting them in front of the companies that where you're saying, hey, Mr. and Mrs. CEO, COO, whoever, you need to hire this person because they may not have the specifics of what you want, but they've got everything else and they can learn the specifics because it's a learned situation anyway. So I just applaud you and thank you for almost 3 decades now of putting people like me, in the right places, and we've been able to shine. We have a lot of scars too, right? Not every business does well. I don't know if you know the most recent statistics. I got them from one of my business coaches who has written 3 books in private equity. He wrote Adam Coffey. He's written the book Private Equity Playbook, Private Equity Exit Strategy, and then Empire Builder is his most recent book. And he was telling me, I met him up in Fort Worth at his country club 6 weeks ago because I try to meet with him every 6 weeks. He's built 58 companies, 2.4 billion in exits. I'm like, this guy has done it. I still pinch myself that I actually have access to this guy, right? He likes me for some reason. I don't really know why. But he was saying, Craig, out of 32.9 million registered companies, meaning registered as an LLC, C Corp, or S Corp. He goes, I don't know if it's specifically these in MedTech. He goes, it may be worse, it may be a little better. But he goes, it's not going to be off too much in your industry. He said, but 93.4% of companies never make it to $1 million in revenue. Out of the ones that do make it to $1 million in revenue, only 4.1% out of the 6.6% make it to 10 million. And then it's something like 0.004% make it to 100 million or above. And, that was considered from the Small Business Administration of 500 employee W-2 employees or smaller in those companies, which represented something like 97.8% of companies or something like that. And when he told me that, number one, I knew he wasn't lying because of who he is, but I was just like, the deck is stacked against us in business. It really is, and it just really made me think about, if you're one of the lucky people who have sold $1 million, 2 million, 5 million in some way, shape, or form, you are in the elite in business. It was just shocking.
And you weren't lucky.
Right, exactly, right? It was where opportunity met preparation. Joe, thank you again. I appreciate it a ton. Have a great week and weekend, and look forward to seeing you and keep talking to you on a regular basis. I appreciate your time.
Appreciate the discussion. Thanks so much.
You got it. Wow. Well, those are our raw lessons revealed to us on this episode from a gentleman who has access to pretty much every MedTech and HealthTech company executive in our industry. I really liked what Joe said about the A players having their own culture within a company's culture. If a person wants to be part of the elite, they will never punch the clock. They will regularly do more activities in building their craft without being asked. They do more than what is expected off the clock. They are constantly sharpening their skill set blade. They are consistently using their critical thinking skills, which sometimes can actually rub less skilled people the wrong way if they are more of a check the box type of business professional. High output business professionals never just go with the flow. They expect more effective decision making based upon higher up the ladder of leadership a person is. There was so much to learn from here today, and Joe was fantastic, and he brought the heat. Thank you so much for listening and taking notes. So together, we all can apply these very same principles and actions that Joe mentioned and use them in our own businesses. It's always an honor to have these ultra successful business professionals on this program, sharing real, raw, no nonsense insights on what has made them or makes them and keeps them in the top elite level of business professionals worldwide. Please join us on the next episode where we will keep having access to more people that have a heart for effectiveness in business and in life. And would you be willing just to take 7 seconds and please give a comment, and tap a 5-star rating to this podcast on the platform from where you are listening, and hit that subscribe button for more raw lessons revealed. See you next episode.